Welcome to Reform Thinking. So, I want you to picture standing in a courtroom today.
Okay, a courtroom.
Yeah, but not just any courtroom. It is a highly publicized trial. You have a known, completely unrepentant criminal sitting right there at the defense table.
Like front page news everywhere.
Absolutely. We are talking about someone caught on camera
Right.
committing blatant treason against the state and, causing massive destruction.
Right. Total open and shut case.
Yes, the prosecution lays out an airtight case. The families of the victims are sitting in the gallery, and they are just waiting for justice.
As they should be.
Right. But then the judge looks at the mountain of evidence, looks at the guilty party, and just smiles.
Oh, boy.
He says, you know what? I am in a good mood today. I forgive you. You can go free.
Wow. The public outrage would be instantaneous.
It would be absolute chaos. We would call that judge corrupt. We would demand his resignation immediately.
Yeah, because we want our justice system to be unbending. A law that bends for criminals, well, it ceases to be a law at all. It just becomes a suggestion.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. That outrage you feel in the courtroom scenario, that sets up an absolute cosmic legal crisis.
It really does. You have a perfectly holy creator on one side, and you have human beings who are entirely guilty of treason against him on the other.
Right, and the massive dilemma is how to reconcile those two facts. How does that holy judge acquit guilty rebels without compromising his own righteous character?
That is the big question. If he simply waves a hand and dismisses the treason, he is no longer a just judge.
So to unpack this, we are pulling from some heavy theological literature, including John Piper's writings and several extensive exegetical commentaries.
Yeah, and we are looking at one of the most startling, shocking sentences in all of ancient literature.
We were talking about the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, verse 10. It states that the Lord was pleased to crush his servant.
Which is just a massive statement. What is so striking about the sources we're reviewing is how this specific text completely strips away modern human sentimentality.
Right, because we tend to view the cross as, well, like a tragic accident of history.
Yeah, maybe the sad result of political corruption or religious bigotry in the first century. But this ancient verse says no.
It presents the cross as a deliberate sovereign execution.
Spot on. It was designed from eternity past to vindicate divine justice and secure salvation for a specific people.
It is not a tragedy at all. It is a legal execution. And I promise you, if you stick with us through this conversation, understanding this single verse will entirely rewrite how you view divine justice.
And human guilt. And the actual mechanics of grace.
So let us set the stage here. The literature starts by establishing the sheer scale of this legal crisis. The universe is governed by a creator who has an absolute unyielding passion for his own glory.
And that has to be the starting point for any logical theology. Everything God does is for the manifestation of his own infinite worth.
Right.
His eternal decree is holy, and it is wise, and it is designed to uphold that glory. The problem is humanity has committed cosmic treason.
We exchange that immortal glory for created things.
Yes. When the Apostle Paul writes that all have fallen short of the glory of God, he means we lack it as our ultimate treasure. We traded the Creator for the fleeting pleasures of a broken world.
Which brings us right back to our corrupt judge analogy. We are the ones who committed the treason.
We are the ones on camera, so to speak.
Yeah, trading the glory of God for garbage.
Yeah.
If God simply sweeps our treason under the rug, he acts unrighteously. He treats his own desecrated glory as inconsequential.
Right, which he cannot do.
So how does God avoid being that corrupt judge when he forgives sinners?
Well, John Piper addresses this massive tension in his work, The Pleasures of God. He points out that the cross is the actual legal resolution to this crisis.
Okay, break that down for us.
The Father finds a holy, sovereign pleasure in bruising his Son because it averts the wrath of God against sinners.
By placing that wrath squarely on a substitute.
Yes. By crushing the Messiah, God honors his own justice while simultaneously releasing his mercy. The debt is not ignored, the debt is paid.
So it is a propitiation. That is a heavy theological word, but it basically means averting wrath by making a satisfying payment.
That is the core mechanism, yes. God averts his own righteous wrath by placing it on his Son.
The cross is where the love of God for his own glory and his love for undeserving sinners meet without any rivalry.
Absolutely. It proves that God is both perfectly righteous and the sovereign justifier of the ungodly. The legal requirement is fully met in the substitute.
I want to ground this for a second because The practical application for your everyday life as a listener is massive here.
Oh, it changes everything.
It means your salvation rests on a rock-solid legal transaction. It does not rest on flimsy sentimentality.
No, it does not rest on God just feeling nice one Tuesday afternoon.
Right. Your acquittal in the cosmic courtroom is backed by the full satisfaction of divine justice.
And to truly grasp the weight of this transaction, we really have to look at the historical context.
Yeah.
We cannot treat Isaiah 53 as some abstract philosophical poem floating in the clouds.
No, we have to understand the terrifying historical reality check of 8th century BC Judah.
Exactly. Isaiah ministered during the reigns of four kings, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah.
So let us paint a picture of what living in that era actually felt like for those people. This was a time of massive geopolitical upheaval.
Massive. You have the northern kingdom of Israel facing brutal expansion by the Assyrian Empire.
Which eventually leads to their total exile in 722 BC. And the Assyrians were not just a regular army.
Not at all. They were the absolute terror of the ancient world.
I mean, they were historically notorious for their psychological warfare and just absolute brutality.
Yeah, they would literally flay their enemies alive. They would pile the skulls of conquered cities outside the gates as a warning to everyone else.
It was a terrifying era, and the southern kingdom of Judah was teetering on the edge of the exact same fate.
They were constantly tempted to compromise their covenant identity, and they wanted to form these idolatrous political alliances with pagan nations like Egypt and Assyria.
Rather than trusting in the sovereign protection of Yahweh. So they're living in a state of constant sheer panic.
Yes, and their spiritual state was just abysmal.
They had the temple, right?
Yeah.
They had the priesthood, they had all the sacrifices, but it was all empty, formalistic ritualism.
The historical data points out Isaiah chapter 1, verse 11, where God delivers this scathing indictment of their worship.
What does he say?
He says, "He is sick of their fat of fed beasts. He does not delight in the blood of bulls and lambs."
Because their hearts were engaged in systemic idolatry.
Right. They divorced their outward ritual performances from inward heart faith. They treated the holy sacrificial system like a manipulative mechanism to appease God while they just kept breaking his covenant.
It is like a husband who constantly cheats on his wife, but then buys her an expensive vacuum cleaner for their anniversary.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Right. He expects her to be thrilled because he spent money,
Yeah.
but he is completely ignoring what she actually cares about, which is fidelity and love.
Yes, the Israelites thought they could bribe the judge with fat animals. That analogy captures the relational disconnect perfectly.
And the ancient Jewish audience living in this terrifying political climate, they wanted a very specific kind of Messiah.
Oh, they wanted a political conqueror. They wanted a second David who would ride in with a sword, smash the Assyrians, break the yoke of foreign oppression, and just restore physical prosperity to the land.
Which makes the message of Isaiah 53 so shocking.
It really is.
They are looking for a military hero with a sword, and Isaiah hands them a bruised, crushed, humiliated servant.
That had to be incredibly offensive to an ancient audience facing imminent destruction. It dismantled their entire carnal expectation.
And Isaiah achieves this by connecting the servant to a very specific ancient Near Eastern practice from the book of Leviticus.
Yes, the guilt offering, or the eshem in Hebrew.
I want to slow down here because modern readers often lump all Old Testament sacrifices together.
We really do. We think of a lamb on an altar and assume it all means the exact same thing.
But there is a massive difference between a general sin offering and a guilt offering.
The distinction is vital for understanding this text. A general sin offering, the 8, focused on cleansing from ritual defilement or unintentional sins.
Okay.
But the guilt offering, the 8, was a highly specific legal restitution for a breach of covenantal law.
It was required when you had desecrated holy things, and legal satisfaction was demanded to repair the damage.
Right. It involved paying back the principal plus a 20% penalty.
Wait, so by calling the servant an age, Isaiah was telling the people of Judah that their real enemy was not the Assyrian army outside their gates.
Spot on. Their real enemy was God's holy wrath against their covenant-breaking rebellion.
Wow. So they did not need a political conqueror. They desperately needed a human age to make legal restitution for their treason.
And that shifts the entire landscape of redemption. It means God's plan is focused on legal execution and restitution. It works through historical space and time.
We see this brilliant design in the literary architecture of the book of Isaiah itself, right? Scholars often call it a miniature Bible.
The structure is fascinating. You have chapters 1 through 39, which mirror the 39 books of the Old Testament.
And they focus heavily on judgment, exposing sin, and the impending exile.
Yes. Then you have chapters 40 through 66, mirroring the 27 books of the New Testament. Those focus on consolation, comfort, and sovereign redemption.
Right in the middle of that second section, we find the servant songs. And we are zooming in on the fourth servant song today.
That spans from Isaiah 52, verse 13, to the end of chapter 53. The literary movement in this song is just breathtaking.
In verses 7 through 9, the prophet maps out the servant's humiliation.
He is led like a lamb to the slaughter. He is silent before his oppressors.
He suffers an unjust execution by human hands, cut off from the land of the living, and assigned a grave with the wicked, despite having no deceit in his mouth.
Let us use an analogy here to capture the shift that happens next.
Okay, I love analogies.
Think of verses 7 through 9 like a movie set. The camera is zoomed in extremely tight on the human tragedy.
You see the dirt. You see the Roman soldiers casting lots.
You see the cowardice of Pilate washing his hands. You hear the screaming hostility of the crowds yelling for crucifixion.
From that tight angle, it looks like a pathetic miscarriage of justice, a total failure.
But then, in verse 10, the camera suddenly pans way, way back.
That pivot changes the entire meaning of the event.
It really does. If the text ended at verse 9, the cross would just be a tragedy. It would be a victory of human malice over innocent righteousness.
But verse 10 pulls the camera back to strip away all those secondary human causes and reveals the primary director of the event.
God the Father. The text says, "Yet it pleased the Lord to crush him."
It exposes that the actions of wicked men, while they are fully responsible and morally culpable for their evil, were completely subservient to the unchangeable counsel of the Almighty.
Yes. The world looks at the cross and says Christ was a victim of historical circumstances. But the text says he was crushed by the sovereign hand of God.
To truly feel the weight of that statement, we have to look at the lexical shock of the original Hebrew vocabulary.
We really do. The words chosen by the author carry immense, terrifying weight.
I would love to walk through those specific Hebrew words, because reading it in English as the Lord was pleased to crush him is heavy, but whenever I dig into ancient languages, the original vocabulary always carries sharper edges.
Very true. The race begins with a dramatic contrast. Why, meaning yet the Lord.
Okay, so that places the active sovereignty of God in direct opposition to the wicked human agents from the previous verses.
Right. Men despised him, yet the Lord was pleased to crush him. Then we hit the verb vopu, translated as pleased or delighted.
I have to stop you there. To a modern ear, hearing that God was pleased to crush his son sounds like cosmic child abuse.
It does.
It sounds sadistic, like a deity enjoying the torture of an innocent victim. How do we avoid viewing God as a sadistic monster based on that word?
Well, it is a very natural human reaction to recoil at that phrasing. However, it is crucial to understand that Deity does not mean emotional, sadistic enjoyment of physical agony.
Okay, so what does it mean?
It denotes active, dynamic, sovereign approval of the redemptive end. The author deliberately bypassed more passive Hebrew verbs, like ra, which can imply mere passive acceptance or permission.
So God did not just passively permit the crucifixion as if you were watching helplessly from heaven.
No, it was his active, positive choice. He approved of the perfect obedience, the sacrificial love, and the righteous satisfaction of justice displayed in the Son's death.
So he delights in the vindication of his holiness and the salvation of his people. The pleasure is in the successful payment of the debt, not in the physical pain itself.
Correct. Then we get to the word for crush, which is dako.
That sounds intense.
This is an incredibly violent word. It means total, destructive shattering, to beat down to the dust.
Wow.
The prophet could have used softer words, like ma'ak, which means to press or squeeze. But he uses the most extreme vocabulary of violent destruction to show that the punishment was infinite in severity.
It is a total shattering. And the text continues with the phrase heli, meaning to put to grief.
Yes, that is the causative action of making sick or causing acute, agonizing pain. Yahweh himself was the active agent causing the suffering.
The Father laid his holy hand upon the Son.
And the mechanism for this is when the servant presents his nepah as an asham.
Okay, break down that posh for us.
His nepah is his soul, his life, his entire personal existence. He does not just bring an offering to the altar, he is the offering.
He presents his very self as the guilt offering, the legal restitution for our treason. Reacting to the sheer violence of these terms is just staggering.
It is.
It sounds so different from the sanitized versions of Christianity we often hear today, where the cross is presented simply as a display of empathy, or God standing in solidarity with human suffering.
Or a divine protest against systemic violence. But the vocabulary proves unequivocally that the Father was the principal executioner.
The physical instruments, the nails, the spear, the cross, the Roman guards, they were secondary.
The primary crushing was the infinite weight of divine wrath falling on the substitute.
When we synthesize all of this lexical data, our literature points out three massive theological assertions or pillars that form the absolute core of the gospel in Isaiah 53, verse 10.
The first pillar is sovereign execution.
Right.
The crucifixion was direct and planned by the Father. It was not a desperate backup plan implemented after humanity ruined God's initial design in the Garden of Eden.
It was the eternal decree of the triune God before time began.
Exactly. The second pillar is penal substitution.
The suffering was a strict legal payment. Christ did not die to simply show us how to love or to gain a moral influence over our hearts to inspire us to be better people.
He died to bear the literal legal penalty due to our transgressions.
The wrath of a holy God was poured out in all its undiluted fury upon our substitute. He stood in our place, absorbing the blow we deserved.
And the third pillar is guaranteed victory.
Guaranteed victory, okay.
The text says, he will prolong his days and see his offspring, meaning the death guarantees physical resurrection and infallible justification.
But let me push back on the concept of a guarantee here for a second.
Sure.
What does this mean for the debate between potential salvation versus actual salvation? Does the cross just make salvation possible for anyone who decides they want it? Or does it actually accomplish it on its own?
Well, this is where the text directly refutes the theological framework known as Arminianism.
Okay, unpack that.
Arminianism suggests that Christ's death only made salvation a possibility. It claims he died for everyone potentially, but guaranteed salvation for no one specifically.
It leaves the final determining factor of salvation in the hands of the sovereign will of the human creature. Wait, so under that framework, Jesus could die on the cross, pay the penalty, and still theoretically have 0 people in heaven if no one chose to accept it.
Yes.
The cross just builds a bridge, but we have to walk across it.
That is the logical conclusion of a potential atonement. But the grammar of Isaiah 53, verse 10, completely rejects that premise.
Because the text says, the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand, and he shall see his offspring.
These are absolute, unconditional covenantal guarantees. Because the servant successfully completed his atoning work, his death is followed by his physical resurrection to eternal life, and it guarantees the salvation of all for whom he died.
This is what Reformed theology called definite atonement.
Yes, the cross actually purchased and secured specific people. It ensures that not one of his sheep will ever perish.
The cross does not just make a theoretical offer of salvation, it creates the church it purchases. The payment actually secures the release of the prisoners.
Now, let us connect this to the New Testament. How does Jesus perfectly map onto this ancient text?
Wait, before you answer that, Isaiah says a human has to be this guilt offering. But no normal human is perfectly innocent. Every human is a treasonous rebel. How does this ancient text resolve that impossible standard?
That is a great question. The New Testament resolves it by explicitly identifying the servant with Christ, the incarnate Son of God, who is fully human and fully divine.
Because he is human, he can represent humanity.
And because he is divine, his sacrifice has infinite worth, and he is perfectly sinless. When you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, Paul writes that God made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
And in Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, it says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us.
That is the exact fulfillment of the Yashim, the guilt offering. It introduces the concept of imputation.
Let us break down how imputation actually works, because it sounds like abstract legal jargon to a lot of people.
It does.
Think of a modern financial scenario. Imagine you have a staggering unpayable debt. You owe $50 billion to the government because of massive fraud.
Okay, $50 billion, that is a lot.
You are facing life in prison. Imputation means a billionaire steps into the courtroom. He does not just pay your $50 billion debt down to 0.
Because that would just leave you broke.
Right. He pays the debt to 0, and then he transfers his own perfect $50 billion positive credit score into your bank account.
That analogy hits the mark perfectly. Our legal guilt is transferred or imputed to Christ's account on the cross. He pays the debt.
then his perfect, lifelong obedience and righteousness are transferred or imputed into our account.
Christ took our condemnation that we might receive his justification.
And this was all planned before the foundation of the world in what theologians call the Pactum Salutis.
Yes.
Hold on, Pactum Salutis sounds like a spell from a fantasy novel.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean in plain English?
It translates to the covenant of redemption. It refers to a pre-temporal agreement made between the persons of the Trinity.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit before creation even existed.
Exactly. They agreed on the plan to save a people for their own glory. The Father chooses the elect and sends the Son.
The Son willingly agrees to become incarnate, perfectly obey the law, and suffer the wrath due to the elect.
And the Holy Spirit agrees to apply the accomplished work of the Son to the elect in space and time.
Which brings me back to the cosmic child abuse objection. When critics hear that the Father poured out wrath on the Son, they picture an angry father beating a helpless, reluctant child.
It is a common critique.
So how does the covenant of redemption dismantle that argument structurally?
The criticism fails because it completely misunderstands Trinitarian theology. The Son was not a reluctant victim being bullied by a hostile deity.
In the covenant of redemption, the Son willingly and joyfully agreed to this legal transaction.
Yes. Jesus himself says in John chapter 10, verse 17, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord."
So there is perfect, unforced Trinitarian harmony. The Father is not forcing the Son against his will.
Absolute harmony. The Father's love for the Son actually reached its highest, most expansive proportions at the cross because of the Son's supreme devotion to the Father's glory.
The Father and Son were not divided in aim. They were completely united in holiness and grace.
To call it abuse is to sever the will of the Son from the will of the Father, which destroys the doctrine of the Trinity.
This ancient framework is so sharp, and it directly confronts the practices of the modern church today.
It certainly does.
The literature we are reading takes a strong analytical stance against several modern deviations. First, you have the seeker-sensitive model of church.
Right.
This model often reduces the cross to a marketing tool designed to boost human self-esteem. It tells people, Christ died because you were so infinitely valuable and special.
And it completely flips the biblical narrative. The text says Christ died because God is so infinitely holy and our sins are so monumentally offensive.
The seeker-sensitive model trivializes sin into mere brokenness or a mistake that needs a therapeutic remedy.
Rather than cosmic treason that requires a bloody legal execution.
It turns Jesus into a life coach rather than a substitute on death row.
That is very clear.
Second, the analysis takes aim at liberal theologians like George MacDonald. What did MacDonald teach, and why does this text challenge his views so strongly?
MacDonald denied penal substitution entirely. He denied the reality of an eternal hell and retributive justice.
He reduced the cross to a moral inspiration, meant to influence our hearts so we could make our own internal atonement by turning away from sin.
And the literature points out that a gospel without wrath cannot explain the violent bruising and crushing detailed in Isaiah 53.
Furthermore, a gospel without legal substitution cannot explain the Ashon, the guilt offering. If Jesus is just setting a good moral example, why is God the Father actively crushing him?
It makes the cross an absurd tragedy if it is just a moral example. And the analysis also challenges the Roman Catholic view of justification.
Okay, let's dig into that.
The Roman Catholic system of cooperative justification attempts to add human merit, sacraments, and continual ritual sacrifices to the finished work of the cross.
But Isaiah 53, verse 10, teaches that the servant alone made the guilt offering.
The pleasure of the Lord prospered in his hand, not ours. Faith is the empty hand that receives the gift. It is not a work that completes it.
Our salvation rests entirely on the objective, finished work of Christ. Adding human merit to the Aj insults the sufficiency of the substitute.
It really does.
I want to pivot to a highly practical question for the listener. We have talked a lot about cosmic courtrooms and ancient Hebrew vocabulary today.
Yes, a lot of heavy theology.
But if a listener is going through immense personal suffering right now, maybe a devastating medical diagnosis or a financial collapse, and the world, or even their own conscience, is telling them, God must be punishing you for a sin you committed.
That is a terrible burden to carry.
How does this text change their reality?
It provides the most comforting pastoral application imaginable. Because Christ completely absorbed the penal wrath and legal punishment of God in your place, your current suffering is never condemnation.
The justice of God has been fully satisfied in the substitute. God cannot demand double payment for the same debt.
Therefore, a believer's affliction is fatherly discipline. It is designed for conformity to Christ or preparation for glory. It is never God's vindictive wrath.
That shifts everything. Your assurance does not rest on your own fluctuating feelings, your daily performance, or how easy your life is at the moment.
No, it rests on the historical, objective fact that the Lord was pleased to crush the Son and that the legal transaction was entirely
The
successful.
pleasure of the Lord prospered. The debt is paid. It is finished.
Amen.
We have covered massive ground today. To summarize, Calvary is not a tragedy. It is the throne from which the Lamb conquers.
The terrifying dissonance between God's absolute justice and his electing mercy is beautifully, perfectly resolved in the crushing of the servant.
Grace is not divine softness. It is holy love, providing at infinite cost what holiness requires.
At the end of the day, that is the gospel.
Before we close, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If the legal debt for your rebellion was so definitively paid that it guaranteed Christ's resurrection and your total acquittal in the cosmic courtroom, consider your daily battles with specific sins tomorrow.
Oh, that is a great thought.
You aren't fighting for a future victory. You are fighting from a verdict that has already been handed down. How does knowing your specific guilt has already been crushed change the way you face your very next temptation? Thank you for joining this deep dive of Reformed thinking.